Hey everyone, I'm Rick and thanks for joining me. Today we'll be looking at another DAC, the SMSL DO200 Pro. A friend of mine owns one of these DO200 Pros, so I asked to borrow his to listen to in my system, and I loved it so much that I went ahead and pulled the trigger and I purchased one myself a couple months ago. I also own the DO100 Pro and I use that one in my bedroom connected to a projector. But my music listening is mostly done on my den on my main system with the DO200 Pro. And if you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, you'll probably know that I love the sound of the Topping D70 Octo. That's one of my favorite DACs. So before I tell you why I chose to purchase the SMSL D200 Pro over the Topping D70 Pro Octo, first let's take a look at the unit. The build quality is very solid on this. It's better than the SMSL DO200 Pro and definitely better than the amplifier, the PA40. That one has a plastic knob, but here we have a full aluminum knob, so it's much nicer on the knob. It just feels nicer in your hand as well. We'll power the unit on. If we hold down, we power off. You'll see the standby light on. A quick press powers back on. And we'll go through the settings. A single press of the encoder will get us into the menu. And the first setting is inputs. And here we can select any of our inputs. We have USB, Bluetooth, optical, coaxial, and HDMI ARC. Next is our output, and here we can select all out, the balanced only, so XLRs, or the unbalanced only, or RCAs. Next are PCM filters, and here we see the 5 Cirrus Logic filters. I keep it on filter number 2. Next is our USB class, so we can select USB Audio Class 1 or USB Audio Class 2. Next is our pre-mode. We can select whether we have a fixed out, or if you want to use this DAC as a preamp, you'll select variable out. I always have it at fixed out. Next is our function key set. We can select what the function key on the remote control does to output selection or to activate the Bluetooth. Our dimmer, if we have it set to off, the screen will always be on, or we can select anywhere from 5 seconds all the way up to a minute. Our brightness, and here we get 6 levels of brightness. And finally our factory reset. And if we leave the controls alone for about 30 seconds, it'll take us back to our main screen. On the rear here from the left, we have one set of XLR outputs and one set of RCA outs, followed by our digital inputs, one coaxial digital, one Toslink optical, one HDMI ARC, Bluetooth, and finally a USB. Next to that our IEC inlet. No fuse on this one, but we do have that very nice rocker that SMSL uses. On the inside here we can see the power supply, and on this one, as opposed to the PA40 power amp by SMSL, they do have a ground as well. So you have plus, minus, and ground. Then you have an ultra low noise power supply, and this is a switching power supply with plus and minus 12 volts. Over here a set of 4 Nichicon filtering capacitors. Here we see the Qualcomm Bluetooth module. The Bluetooth antenna normally goes from here to this UFL connector, but I don't use Bluetooth, so I removed that. And the most interesting part of it are 6 DACs on one side and the other 6 on the other side. Those are the Cirrus Logic chips. So super clean on the inside. Great job SMSL. The DO200 Pro also comes with a plastic remote control like all the SMSL products, and you can go through all the menu settings with the remote control as well. And finally, on the underside of the DAC, you have a small little toggle where you can change the output voltage of the XLRs from 4 volt to 5 volt. I keep it on the more standard 4 volt. As for specs, I'll share them alongside the D70 Pro Octo specs as well. And I use the XLR outputs, so I'll put the specs up for those, and they also match those of the D70 Pro Octo. Both use multiple Cirrus Logic multi-bit DACs. On the DO200 Pro, the Cirrus Logic CS43131 x 12, as we've seen earlier, 6 for each channel. THD plus N at less than 0.00006, signal to noise ratio at 134 decibels, and the maximum output voltage on the XLRs at 4.2 volts and 5.2 volts. I'd say the SMSL DO200 Pro and the Topping D70 Pro Octo are indistinguishable. And sonically, to my ear, the characteristics are so similar that I really can't tell them apart. Both very neat, tight, and polite. Initially, they give this impression of less detail than other Delta Sigma DACs, but after listening for a couple hours, You can hear that they actually have a ton of detail, but just with a slightly softer edge. And less bass quantity but more bass quality. Plenty of texture in the bass. And generally smooth sounding and slightly relaxed. Not as relaxed as my Cambridge Audio 851N, but more so than the ESS and AKM DACs that I've tested recently. Now comparing the DO200 Pro against the D70 Pro Octo in features, the Octo has a few additional features that set it apart. An AES EBU input, 12-volt trigger in and outs, a slightly better build quality with a nicer screen, and a slick UI. The DO200 Pro on the other hand has an HDMI ARC input, and for some buyers this might be the deciding factor. So why did I choose the DO200 Pro over the D70 Pro Octo? Well, frankly, it was the price. The Topping D70 Pro Octo is distributed by Apos Audio with an MSRP at around $600, and on occasion you can find it on sale for around $560. The DO200 Pro on the other hand is distributed by Aoshida Audio with an MSRP at $400. And again, I bought this one a couple months ago on sale and I got it for $360. So a great deal, quite a bit cheaper than the Octo. But I don't want anybody to get me wrong. I do prefer the more complete package of the D70 Pro Octo. The Aurora UI interface on the Octo is slightly nicer to navigate. And the beautiful screen with options for VU meters and FFT is super fun to look at. But the thing is, for me, those extra luxuries really don't do anything for the sound. I usually have my screens off on all my devices. I set my DACs to fixed outputs and I don't even use the remote controls. I control the volume with my preamp. And I personally don't care about those trigger outs because I leave my DAC and my streamer on 24/7. And I don't care about the UI because I set my DAC up once the way I like it and I forget about it. And my streamer, the Cambridge Audio 851N, does have an AES EBU out, but I always find myself using the optical anyways, which is still spitif. But I guess I shouldn't say I don't care. What I should say is that I don't care enough to spend extra money on those features when I'm really trying to stretch my dollar to get the best sound quality. Now on the other hand, if you have some extra money in your budget, there's absolutely nothing wrong with adding some of that money over to the user experience side of the column. If someone were to gift me a DAC, and it was between the DO200 Pro and the D70 Pro Octo, you better believe I choose the Octo. But since that's not happening, the D200 Pro it is. And I'm extremely happy with it. My analogy would be, if you're going out car shopping and you're looking at two of the same cars with the same 300 horsepower engine. Now the DO200 Pro has cloth seats and the Octo has leather seats. And you're paying that additional money for those leather seats. But they're both going to hit the same 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. And if you want to hit that 0 to 60 in 4.2, that's when you have to pony up for the 400 horsepower engine. So performance wise, for the money, these DACs are very comparable. The SMSL is just a little more budget conscious, whereas the Topping gives you a few more luxury features. But for the price points, you really can't go wrong with either. And that's all I have for this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.